think we can start chatting. Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Louisa Owen Sandstrom, founder of Patternmaking in Public Places. PIP for short is a project working to democratize access to pattern-making skills by removing barriers of geography, economics, language, age, intimidation, and more. In 2019, we did free pattern-making demos in public parks in all 5 boroughs of New York City. And this year, we're excited to welcome in a series of amazing guest pattern makers. Today is our 8th and probably final event of the 2020 season, and I'm so excited to introduce you to the talented Elinor Vizard, who will be leading a demonstration entitled Making a Pattern for a Simple Knit Sweater. Elinor graduated from the Fashion Institute of Technology in 2019. Sorry about the sirens if you can hear them. She started pursuing knitwear professionally in her junior year while studying abroad in Milan, Italy. Elinor's great aunt taught her to knit when she was little, and she's been exploring and incorporating knitting into her designs ever since. Originally from San Francisco, Elinor grew up in Westchester, New York. In middle school, she began attending pre-college classes at FIT and knew she had found the right place to learn all about design. Elinor is inspired by fun and unconventional patterns and colors. Her senior thesis collection was based on classic horror movies. She worked at Eileen Fisher for a year after graduating from college. She lives and works in New York City with her partner and dog, and her goal is to become the coziest grandma of all time. Okay, so a couple more notes. This event is absolutely 100% free because we want to make these empowering skills as accessible as possible. However, if you are watching now or in the future and feel moved to honor Elinor's work, her Venmo is at ELINOR-VIZARD. And I've put that info in the chat in both Zoom and YouTube. So we're recording this as a live webinar, but we'll make the video available forever afterward. In a few days, it'll be available at patternmakingpublicplaces.com, patternmakinginpublicplaces.com, and on YouTube. And also, please excuse us if there are a handful of internet connection lags today. We expect to have a few, but they'll probably be brief, and we'll make sure to repeat any information that gets cut off. So if you're watching this live on Zoom or YouTube, please feel free to submit questions or comments in either of those places, and I will make sure to pass them to Elinor. So Elinor, thank you so much for being here. Welcome. I'm so excited, and I'll pass things over to you now.
Okay, am I unmuted? Can everyone hear me? Louisa? Hi, everyone. I'm Elinor. I am so excited to be doing this today. Also, if you hear any dog noises in the background, please excuse me. There's several dogs running around in the house. Yes, so I am gonna get started just showing how I'm gonna make a basic, cozy, kind of chunky knit sweater. It's just going to be a super basic box style. I'm going to show how to do a crew neck and V-neck, just straight down, no shaping on the side, basic armhole. That's honestly my favorite kind of sweater, so I feel like it's a good place to start. All right, now can everyone see the aerial view, Louisa? Okay, so I have knit this swatch to start from. I hope everyone can see. It is just a basic jersey stitch, hand knit on 10 gauge, and I have 10 rows, or 10 stitches by 10 rows, and I have a 1x1 rib trim start that is 4 rows by 10 stitches across. So that's what I'm going to start from for this sweater. And I'm going to show just the front panel and sleeve to start with. The back and front will be the same. So I think for the back, you would just alter the neckline. If I have time, I will show that. Okay, so first we should start out with the measurements. So this swatch that I have knit is 5 inches wide, and not including the rib trim, it is about 3.5 inches long this way. Okay, so let me just write that down for us. I'll just write it right on our pattern. Can we see that? I think that's okay. We can see that. And can everyone hear me okay? Louisa, can you just confirm?
Confirmed. Sounds great.
Okay, perfect. Okay, 10 stitches wide. I just write notes to myself everywhere because I can't remember. So that's 5 inches and 10 stitches high equals 3.5. Okay, so I've sketched this out in pencil kind of messily just for my own reference, so it didn't take me forever to figure it out because then we would be here all day. So we'll put this just right over here. So where I usually start is right the hem.
Oh, Elinor,
So I'm thinking our sweater. Can you hear me?
I think we lost you for a moment. Can you just start those last couple sentences again?
Yes. So I'm going to start right at the bottom hem. I always start from the bottom up. Okay. So I believe, yes. So our bottom hem, we're going to have 2 inches of 1x1 rib, and it's going to be 24 inches wide. This is on half scale. So I've taken the sweater and I've done it by, I've calculated it all out to be half. So it's not huge and life size. It's much easier to work this way for me. Okay. So if our swatch is 5 inches wide and 10 stitches, then we want it to be 24 inches wide. We need to figure out how many stitches that will be. So 10 divided by 5 is 2. Luckily, that's very easy to do because I'm not very good at math. Let's see, where's my Sharpie that's better? Oh, this one. Okay. Ten divided by 5 equals 2, and we have 24 inches. So it's really simple, but honestly, I get so confused every time I do this. But I have this 12 inches. Every stitch is a 1/2 inch. So each square here, to me, represents 1 stitch. So right now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, and that's 12 inches represented right here. So pretty simple. I hope you're with me. Then for my 2 inches of rib, I have 2 stitches here, but it's actually double that. So think 2 inches, but it's 1 inch. And this is 12 for half. I hope I'm right about that. I think I am. So we're going to keep going. And I've marked out here for our reference. Let me just make sure. This is 12 inches, and that represents 24 inches. Oh, and that would equal, in real life, to scale, 48 stitches. Sorry if that's not clear, because it's doubled. Because if this sweater is 5 inches, 10 stitches, 24 inches, that equal 48 stitches. Then we're just going to mark off our rib trim. It's going to be 2 inches. Oh, and this rib trim here, it is 4 stitches high, and it is just about 2 inches I mean, it's 4 stitches, yes, so 2 inches, it is going to be, let me think. So if it's 1 inch of rib, just 2 rows, right? That makes sense. And we have 2 rows represented by these boxes right here. And we're just going to mark off our rib on our pattern. I always do this. I had a professor tell me that I have to always indicate the rib on my patterns. And I was like, but I know where the rib is. But it's much easier when you look at it visually to see the actual lines. I just do it. I don't even use a ruler. I just do the little dash lines. There we go. Okay. So now for the harder part. We are going to do, I think we're going to make this sweater 20 inches long from high point shoulder. The measurements may not be perfect. You can always alter them. You know, every sweater is different, and I always end up altering it. Honestly, mid making my sweater, sometimes I'm like, this is way too, you know, short.
Oops, Elinor.
So
can you? I think we had a lag. Can you just repeat that last part about finding your measurement?
yes. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We're good? Okay. So I'm going to make this sweater 20 inches high, 20 inches long in real life. So on our scale, on our pattern, we need to figure out how many rows we need all the way up to high point shoulder.
Actually, Elinor, can we pause momentarily? So in terms of finding those measurements on your own body, I know you said that it's going to be 24 inches wide at the bottom hem and 20 inches from high point of shoulder. So 2 questions. Can you explain how you found that number 24 based on maybe your own body or sweaters you like? And also, where is high point of shoulder?
Okay. So for these measurements, some of them are kind of, I've measured sweaters that I've liked. I've measured on my own body. I kind of judge in between that. They're not always perfect. I would recommend you measure like the hem on your favorite sweater that you feel like fits well, or just measure on yourself and kind of, you know, trial and error. So these measurements that I'm using might not be perfect, and you might honestly, if you think something like that's way too short, that's way too small, you know, it might be. So in terms of finding the actual measurement points, so I'm measuring from high point shoulder, which is right at like basically the highest point on your neck, like where your shoulder hits your neck. And then I'm measuring just straight down, like to the hem. Yeah, so that is the longest measurement on the sweater. So it's going to be, I'm going to do 20 inches just to make it a little bit easier. Also, 20 I feel like is a good clean number for me to use. So also 24 I feel like is a good boxy width on a sweater. I know at Eileen Fisher we like to use that for boxy sweater. So where was I? Sorry. We're going to find the length, total length. Okay, so 10 stitches high is 3.5 inches. So we are going to need to do some more intense math than 10 divided by 2. It's not that intense, but 10 divided by 3.5. That equals, I believe, 2.8, only because I've done it already. Then we're going to make it 20 inches. We would do 2.8 times 20, if I'm not wrong. And I'm going to use the calculator for this, even though I could probably do it, but Give me 1 second. Okay, so that equals 56. I think so. Okay. And then we'll divide that by 2. And that gives us 28 stitches. So we want to represent 28 stitches right here. And this is all on half scale. So what is 28 divided by 2? 14. So that means on our half scale pattern, we want our sweater to be 14 inches long. And that is right here. This would be high point shoulder. Make sure this is straight all the way down. And we're including our rib trim at the bottom in the total length. Okay, so the next thing we need to find is how high our armhole is going to be. So over here, so I have decided somewhat arbitrarily that it will be, is someone asking a question?
Yes, it looks like Amanda is asking, can you quickly explain the length math again, please? So how do you determine the number of stitches, I guess, based on that 20-inch body length that you came up with?
Yes, this is a little trickier because length is always harder for me with sweaters. It's not always exact. I always end up doing some sort of rounding. You always want an even number of stitches also. So if you come out with like 29, or 31, you're going to always need to kind of finagle it. Just a disclaimer. Okay, so let's start with the swatch again. This swatch is 10 stitches high, 10 rows, and we're not including the rib trim here at the bottom. That's 2 inches. So it is about 3.5 inches long. So then we want our sweater to be 20 inches long total. We're first going to do 10 divided by 3.5. That's 2.8. Then we are going to do 20 times 2.8 so that we have the same proportion, and that would be 56. In real life, our sweater would then be 56 total rows high from hem to high point shoulder. For our purposes, we are going to half that. And let's make sure. So that's 28. Then to represent it on this pattern, where each stitch here is a box, we're going to have that again. And that's going to be 14 inches. So basically, each little half inch in here is representing the 28 stitches. This is 14 inches. Does that make sense? I know it's a little tricky. Okay. So now finding our armhole measurement. Armhole, we're going to come like right up to, like, we want kind of a loose armhole, kind of like this sweater I'm wearing, plenty of room. So we're going to do, I think, 12 inches from, and I don't know if this is actually the proper way to measure this, but this is just how I do it. I want to do 12 inches from the hem up here. So total, we would have about 8 inches from my point shoulder, and then another 12 here. This is all.
Sorry, Eleanor, would you say that 8 inches is sort of a pretty good standard, like women's size medium measurement for a simple boxy armhole, or?
I would say so, but I wouldn't, I'm saying don't take me at my word. I'm not the authority on that, but that's what I like to do.
Okay, noted. And so maybe again, that's something for people to kind of check out a couple sweaters that they already own and see a fit that they already like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would really recommend just measuring your sweaters at home. That's how I do it. Okay, so first we are going to find the measurement minus 2 inches for the rib trim at the bottom to our armhole measurement. And we're just going to go straight up. No, we don't have a waist or anything. We're just like super simple boxy sweater. Okay, so we need 10 inches for that. We're going to do the same thing we just did. This is going to be 10 inches. So 10 divided by 3.5 equals 2.8. 2.8 times 10. Bear with me, I'm going to double check my work. Wait, hold on. That is 28. Wow, nice. We're going to divide that by to get to our armhole measurement. But we're going to half that to 14. So each
Sorry,
box.
I think you cut out for a moment. Can you just summarize the math that you're doing right now?
Yes. So we need 28 stitches for our 10-inch armhole to the top of the rib trim measurement. So we're going to half that to 14. Each little box is 1 stitch. So we need 7 inches here on our little half size pattern. Did we get that? Good. Okay. So, and I have that on both sides. We went up 7 inches. Okay. Then my next order of business will be the shoulder width. So shoulder width for me, kind of tricky. I already did some finagling. I think that it should be, we want like a wide shoulder, like maybe kind of like sitting off the shoulder a little bit. So maybe we're thinking 18 inches. This kind of varies. I added already half an inch, took it away again, tried it again. So bear with me. Okay, so for that measurement, here we have 24 inches, that's 12, right? And we need to find, let's find the 18, just as a starting point. Okay, so we are gonna go back to our handy math. 10 divided by 5 is 2, that's helpful. 18 times 2.
Can you push your paper just a little bit higher so we can see the calculation you're doing?
Oh yes, sorry, I had to bring it a little closer.
Beautiful.
Okay, I'm gonna temporarily bring the laptop a little closer to me. You can see my hands. I have a calculator. I don't trust myself to do math in my head, so I just do everything, no matter how simple it seems, on the calculator.
That is incredibly relatable.
Even somebody will be like, what's 2 plus 2? And I'm like, let me get my calculator out.
Totally.
Okay, so wait, we're looking for 18 inches. So let's do 18 times 2 just to be sure. That's 36. I should really know that off the top of my head. Okay, then we have 36. We're gonna, in real life, our sweater width would be 36 stitches across wide. We're gonna divide that by 2. That's 18. Wow, shocking. And we're gonna divide that by half again. That's 9 inches. So we want our, can everybody see? Let's make sure. Okay. So we want our shoulder width to be 9 inches. See, I have this mark here. You can see all these marks are where I was moving around my neckline and shoulder width. earlier trying to decide what I wanted to do. So we're going to make sure that we have half and half. So we need 4.5 on both sides, right? That's half of 9. So right here is the very middle, this mark. Okay, so then here, this mark right here, and this mark right here are going to be our edge of our shoulders. Okay, perfect. Now, we also need to decide how wide our neckline is going to be. I like a neckline that's pretty tight, right up there. So this one, this is 5 inches, and we're going to subtract our 1 inch of rib trim because we add that on later. We want to make sure the pattern is really for just the clean neck finish. Okay, so we need, I believe let me double check my notes. Okay, so this is 5 inches wide. So I believe that is, bear with me, I'm doing it backwards now. Okay, just want to make sure that I'm doing this right. If we want to have a neck width that is 8 inches per se, not necessarily that we'll keep it at 8 inches, we would 1, 2, then we would want it to be 2 inches on either side. Then we want to subtract, and you can see that mark right here. Two inches. Each of these little boxes is stitched. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's how I check myself. I'm like just counting the boxes. And then we're going to take off 1 inch for our rib here. So this is going to be our true neckline right here. And so this is our shoulder. It's kind of mini. Maybe it's 1, 2, 3, only 4 stitches. But in real life, that would be 8. Okay, so we have our shoulder, and we might want to give ourselves a little bit of a shoulder slope, depending. Sometimes I just do it straight across. It's a little bit nicer to have a shoulder slope. So on a sweater, you're working in a grid, so you're always going to give yourself like a little, we want to go down 1 inch here. So for us, we're just going to take out 1 stitch here.
And Elinor, can you quickly, I'm going to quickly spotlight you. Can you quickly just show people what shoulder slope looks like on a body, what that is?
Okay, so everyone's shoulder is a little lower than where it hits right in your neck. Everyone's shoulder kind of slopes down. And most shirts, sweaters have about, let's say, 1 to 2 inch shoulder slope, depending on, you know, how fitted it is and everything. I would say a boxy sweater doesn't need more than a 1 inch shoulder slope, but that's just me. I like it to just kind of hang right off the shoulders, like pretty straight across. So that's what I'm going to do. Is that clear for everyone?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So then if you were really going to do this in real life, you would be casting off 2 stitches here. So you give yourself a little slope. Okay, next would be armhole. So I wanted to do an 8 inch armhole, right? Okay, so for that, we need to do our little, well, actually, there's an easier way to do this. Because we've already done the armhole measurement, and we have 12 inches here, and we know that this is 20, we can really just connect it. But sometimes I like to do the math to make doubly sure. So we really are just going to draw a line from our armhole to our high point shoulder at this point. I did it in pencil. I might just do it in green so now it's not a real line.
We have a quick question from Jess. Can you write down how many inches / stitches the shoulders and neckline are? That's a good question.
Oh, yes, sure thing. So, where is my pen? Okay, so this one, let's just show it right here because it is 2 inches here. In real life, this would be, this is 4 stitches, but we're doing this on half scale, so it would actually be 8 stitches and 4 inches across. Does that make sense? Sorry if that's not clear.
Yeah, so let us know if you have further questions, but yeah, that's helpful. And the reason you're doing it on half scale, I would imagine, is because it's a little less unwieldy to.
Yeah, it's a big safe.
I think you just lagged.
Can everyone see me? I think maybe am I back?
Yes, you're back.
Okay. And then our neckline. So this is upside down. This is 9 inches across. So we have 2 inches, 2 inches, and 5 inches across here. In real life, I think that would be 10 inches. Yes, that makes sense. And that's leaving room for your neck trim. So it's not going to be actually 10 inches wide. It's going to be 8 inches wide once you've added your 1 inch on either side. Okay. And so we're drawing a line from our high point shoulder to our armhole right here. And I just did a square armhole. You can get fancy with rounding this off, getting like cast off one here, cast off another here, you know, do a little, you would do basically like this, like a little stepping stool. I would recommend that, honestly, but for our purposes, I have just squared off 3 stitches here. Oh, I just drew a line down from our high point shoulder and our armhole where they meet. That is 1.5 inches. Real life, that would be 3 inches. And that would be 6 stitches.
And is that 3 inches of sort of armhole shaping in there? Is that kind of a standard amount of, I think, as you would say in the industry, like saddle? Is that kind of a standard amount of cut in there, or is it again based on sweaters you like that fit well?
I think so. It might be a little. Yeah, sometimes sweaters have like a really tiny amount of saddle. Kind of depends. I like to have a little more. But yeah, this is just based on my own preferences and measurements. But yeah, and then so you would basically just cast off 1 stitch here, like you would cast off 2 stitches here, cast off 2 more after 2 rows, cast off 2 more after 2 rows, and you would be at your high point shoulder measurement. You go straight up from there. And then of course you could cast off again here 2 stitches to get your shoulder slope. Let me do that on this side too. Let's just have that. Does that make sense to everyone? I hope so. Okay. So our next thing is the neckline. So I have just done this square. It's not a square, it's a rectangle. Okay, so our neckline depth is the next measurement we want to find. I'm going to show just how to do like a super basic round neck measurement. You know, this might be a little high and tight, or everybody's different. So this measurement is 4 inches down from our center front right here. Just write that down. Okay, and that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8 stitches, and in real life that would be 16. Got it.
And how did you find that 4-inch, 8-inch measurement?
So I just honestly did all myself. I was like, 4 inches seems about right for like a high crew neck, like right at where my shirt right now is. It might be kind of high for your regular sweater, but it's also just very, optional. People have different preferences. I like all my shirts and sweaters to be like right up on my neck, honestly. So yeah, is that helpful?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, so we've got that 4-inch measurement. Help the hang of it, and you know that each square is a stitch. You're like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, and I know this is half scale, so this would be 16 stitches up. So you would start casting off right. This is our little right here. Okay, so I have drawn just right down from our high point shoulder minus our rib trim right here, straight down, and I've just connected it right over here in a square, just so it's clear to me exactly where I would be. And it would not be so square in real life. We would probably do some, let's see, probably do something like this, kind of get in there. So you have 2 stitches in here that give you some rounding. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yeah, so kind of what you're doing is if you sort of imaginary drew in or kind of sketched in like a rounded shape to that neck, then you're finding like the little grid steps that
You're
most closely.
adding in steps to make it a curve, so you don't have like a complete right angle.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, and let's see, I have to do the exact same thing on this side. Okay. Let's see. So this would be our round neck, and our rib trim, we would do 2 rows of our 1x1 rib, just, simple mini rib trim, would be right around. So you could just follow 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. And just imagine this would just be a straight rib that you would link on afterwards, but that would be our trim. I hope that this illustrates it for you.
So cute. So you said link on, and I know that in sort of machine knitting, even home machine knitting, linking is sort of the way. If you're a home hand knitter, I guess then you'd probably pick up stitches along that edge of the neckline and knit the rib straight off of where you picked them up. Is that what you would recommend?
Yeah, you could do that, absolutely. I do that sometimes, but honestly, I knit kind of by hand like a machine knitter sometimes. So I will knit just a rib separately with a little bit of excess and just like hand kind of basically sew it on with the yarn, loop it on, and take off the excess. That's how I prefer to do it. But also you can knit it right on there. That's probably better, probably more effective.
How do you know? So if you do it the way that you just described, where you knit like a little strip of ribbing separately and then loop it on, stitch it on, how do you know how long to make that rib? Is it based on math, or do you kind of come up with an educated guess and then like overlap a little bit if you end up with a little too much?
I calculate like for our rib, I just do the same thing here. So 4 rows would be 2 inches. If I wanted a 2-inch rib, I would knit 4 rows, and then I probably would knit 2 extra or so, and I would use that as my kind of base to hand, basically just sew it right on the neckline. That works for me, but it's not always.
Yeah. In terms of knowing how many stitches to cast on for that ribbing, would you be calculating that like meticulously, or would you guess a number?
Yes. So for the actual width of it, I sometimes just literally count around my neckline so I have a good idea, or I would go look at my pattern and I would literally say that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that's 18 plus another 8. That would be 26, if I'm not wrong. And I would need to double that in real life. That's how many I would cast on. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So also for a V-neck, kind of similar situation, I would find my measurement. I am going to do 9 inches. So that would be, wait, that's not 9 inches. Hold on. 6 inches. Yes, I was reading my ruler wrong. So I would go 6 inches down. I like the V-neck to always kind of line up with the armhole measurement. I don't know, I think like generally they kind of come to around the same area, a little bit higher. So we're going to measure down 6 inches from our center front, and in real life, let's see, that would be 12 inches. And we would do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 stitches here, 6 inches, double that, 24 in real life, 24. So we would start casting off here. Just take it off. Yeah. So I'm just going to draw a line straight from our high point shoulder to that measurement right here. Hope this doesn't get too messy. And of course, you would need to cast off your stitches. So it would look something like, try to draw the grid so it doesn't look too, let's see. Anyway, this is going to get messy because they're going to overlap, but you would need to be casting off your stitches as you went, probably one every row. Yeah. Until you got to your high point shoulder measurement right here. And then also you would leave your room for your 1 inch of rib. So I'm going to do, should have done this on a separate paper so I could really illustrate it. I hope this isn't too confusing. but I'm just going to do 1/2 inch right on this line to represent my 1 inch of rib. And again, you could knit that in, or I would probably knit it separately and add it in and have it join at center front. Does this make sense to everyone? I hope I'm not losing you, my V-neck. Okay, so I want to show the front. For your back, you would probably, your back neck, I would say go down about 2 inches, and you would just, I'm just going to illustrate it really simple. You would go down 1 inch, and you would have your same high point shoulder measurement. You would go down here, and
Do you think you could use a different color just to show us the back for?
yeah, let me see if the orange will show up well. I don't know if it will. Maybe let me try over here. So this is where your back neck would hit. And you would do the same thing, probably just, you would only need 1 stitch to add in your little 2 stitches, cast off right up here. And a little back neck curve. Did we get that?
Yeah, you slowed down, but I think you were just kind of explaining the way the shaping works to make a little curve there.
Yes. So it'd be just the same as your front, just higher, just a little curve. So you have that shaping in the back neck. Okay. Oops, I'm running out of time, but I wanted to, maybe I could quickly show how I would do the sleeve. It's front and back, pretty much the same if you're doing this kind of sweater. Okay. This is a blank sheet of paper. Okay. Hope that everyone can see. Okay. Most sleeves, most people, sleeve length, I think is good, is 24 inches for most human women. You know, it depends. But measure on yourself, just from right top of the shoulder to the wrist. I'm gonna do 24. Can you still see my?
I just switched you to the U view. Can you show us quickly for that 24-inch measurement where it's from and to on a body?
Yes. So I can't really do it myself at the moment. However, I would. But you would just start like right from top of your shoulder, right here, like where on your sleeve when you're wearing a shirt or sweater, right at the top here. And you would measure right to your wrist, just straight across. Probably with your arm down, preferably.
Okay, cool.
Somebody else.
Like you're drafting kind of a somewhat dropped shoulder, right? So so from wherever that shoulder seam begins,
Yeah.
which will vary based on the style, from there to like your wrist bone or wherever you want the sleeve to end.
Yes, yes, very true. Yeah, so kind of if you want it to be lower on your shoulder, you can measure from there, or higher, you know. Okay, so this. Okay, luckily this paper, because I have stapled together sheets of paper, it has a nice crease in the center front for us. So this, because it is 24 inches long, and as we know, 10 rows equals 3.5 inches. We need 24 inches long. We know 24 inches wide. So let's see. 10 divided by 3.5 is 2.8. And 24 times 2.8 equals. That's not right. and that would be 67.2. That's not a clean measurement, so we are going to still divide that in half. We're going to get 33.6. Now, we don't want 33.6 because we're knitting. We can't knit 0.6 of a stitch, right? So we're going to round that up to 34. And we're going to divide 34 in half. And we get 17. We want 17 stitches. That's for our, wait, 17 stitches. Yes, in half. 17 stitches, if we just count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You know what? We don't want 17 stitches. That's not even. We're going to make it 18. Bear with me. If we want 18 stitches, then we need, for our mini purposes, 9 inches long. Does that make sense to everyone? Maybe that's too many. No, we're going to go with it. So make a mark right here and a mark right here. So we want to see those 2 marks. All right, and how wide would we want our cuff to be? I'm going to be generous and say 8. So if we wanted 8 across, we need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 little boxes here. That's going to be 4 inches. That overlaps my math a little, I'm sorry. Does everyone see this little measurement? That would be our cuff.
Yes, totally. Thanks.
Okay. And if we wanted an inch of rib on there too, we would do 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch. These little boxes represent 2 rows, 2 stitches. Okay. Then at the top here, we're going to do a 2-inch sleeve cap. This, I never know how much sleeve cap to give, honestly. I always end up redoing it, undoing my sleeve, reknitting it. So then we're going to go, our armhole is 8 inches. We need our armhole on our sleeve to start, yes, to start 8 inches down from our top of our sleeve cap. Okay. 4 inches, I believe. Yeah. It's going to be right here at 4 inches. I'm going to draw a line. Okay. Just going to be boxy sweater. We're not going to, it's going to be just a super straight across sleeve, drop shoulder a little bit. And okay, how wide do we want our bicep to be? I think that probably 15 inches might be good overall. It's hard to do it for myself right now. Yeah, 14, 15. That's what we're going to go with. Maybe 14. Maybe we can do, we'll do 7.5.
And so when you were measuring that on yourself, you're measuring not only like your body's measurement, but then adding in some room, right? Some ease.
Yes, definitely add in some ease, especially if you want it to be nice and boxy. Don't want it tight on the arm. At least I don't like anything to be tight on the arm. Yes, so then we need 7.5, half of that. We're gonna do right at like 3 3/4 then, huh? Here and right here. And we will draw a line. These sleeves always look kind of funny, but I think they always turn out pretty okay, at least. Like a little triangle. And then we would need to basically draw our little grid of where we're going to cast off each stitch. So like do. And sometimes you gotta run over here. You don't have enough room. $15. So you could cast off of 1. I think that you would end up doing 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 1. So it's a little awkward. It doesn't always line up exactly where you want it. That is okay in my experience. Yes. So. And same thing right here. We would probably do 1, 1, 1 stitch, 1 stitch for every 2 rows, like, or every 2 rows. 1 every 2 rows. Then we could go 4 rows. 1 every. This is also part of it, is plotting out where you're gonna cast off your stitches as you go. You could even write like 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 1. And then this is 1, 2, 3, 4 rows. You're just gonna keep straight. You do 1 for 2 rows, 1, 1, 1. You do 1 for 1, 2, 3, 4 rows, and then again 1 for 2 rows, and then again 1 for 2 rows. I hope does this make sense?
Yeah, it's sort of almost becomes like, I don't know, I mean, like you draw the line and then you just kind of almost eye it to see what steps make sense to your eye, which is kind of cool.
All right, well, I think this pretty much concludes my demonstration. I hope it wasn't too confusing.
No, that was amazing. And so it looks like a little sweater.
Yeah, it looks like a little sweater right on
there. Okay, so we have a question from Derek, and I'm not sure if you'll be able to do this, but Derek asks, can you show us a sweater that you might have handy where you made the neck ribbing in that way that you described? I think the way where you sort of linked it on or sewed it on. I don't know. I think you're not at home right now, so I'm not sure if you have that with you, but.
Yes, I am not at home right now. I do not happen to have one on hand. I wish I could. I want to, go more into demoing how I actually did the knitting for the sweater and the neckline, but I don't think I have something to show you right now. Is that okay?
That is allowed. And also, I'll remind everybody in a minute, but if you have questions for Elinor that come up for you later, she has graciously offered up her email address. So feel free to email her, and I'll share that again in a minute, but it is in the chat for both Zoom and
YouTube. Yeah, I could send pictures via email if that works.
Cool. Okay, so everybody, I know that we're getting toward that time. So if you have further questions, definitely please ask them. And in the meantime, I have a couple questions for you. So, well, first of all, I just wanted to comment, you used graph paper, which seems like it's a really helpful
Yes,
tool.
definitely use graph paper. This is just literally notebook paper that I've stapled together from like a graph paper, like any, notebook you would use for math class, you know.
Okay, yeah, I love that. And also you mentioned shortly before we went live that you happen to have a shortage of tape where you're staying right now, and so you stapled it, and I thought that was wonderfully resourceful. And a good reminder to everybody that probably what you have around your house or the house where you're visiting, you can probably make it work for the pattern making that you're trying to do, even if it means stapling together multiple sheets out of a notebook or whatever you have to do.
Yes. And even, I mean, it might be tedious, but you could draw your own squares. Just take your ruler, I was going to do that if I had no graph paper.
Yeah, totally. I think, aren't there also like you can probably print it online somewhere. There's probably.
You can. I've done that before. I just don't have a printer here. You can even, you could print it to your exact specifications of your stitch if you want it to be like really, true to life size. I would recommend that.
Okay, awesome. Also, well, I think, so obviously you did a whole lot of math for us today. And partly I just want to commend you on that, because I think for so many of us, we maybe don't feel like we're that good at math, and certainly don't feel that we're that good at doing math in public on live video. But I love that you like actually clearly do know what you're doing. And, if you're feeling a little shaky on the calculations because you're doing it in public, or you're just confusing yourself, like, use a calculator. Who cares?
Yeah. Oh, I always use, I can't, sometimes I'm like, oh, I definitely know how to do that. But I always double check everything with a calculator because, yeah, I've made some crazy mistakes with my math, made like a super long sweater, so it happens.
Yeah. Do you, what was I going to ask? Oh, do you make a sort of visual kind of schematic pattern like this every time that you're going to knit something? Or do you sometimes do it in a maybe more free form way, or maybe a less visual way? Like, how does your personal process look?
So I don't always do this when I'm making a sweater, although I sometimes do it sort of piecemeal. Like I might start with just the bottom rib trim, and maybe I might calculate to the armhole. I do that a lot, and I make a little graph for myself, not even really a graph, just like a sketch with the measurements, and I will just start knitting from there. And once I get to the armhole, I will further calculate where I go next. And then once I get to neckline, I kind of do it as I go a lot. This doesn't work for everyone, but that's how I do it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I like that. And I like that, I don't know, it kind of shows that you can do as much math as suits your mood or your personality type or your, energy that day, and can probably come up with a pretty great sweater by doing a lot or just a little bit of math.
Yeah, you kind of take it step by step. That's how I like to do it, because honestly, it's a lot going on with the math. I mean, it's not actually too tricky once you get once you have the visual aid going. I feel like it becomes clear, but yeah, it's a lot to do sometimes.
Yeah, and so the pattern that your sort of final product here, the pattern you came up with, is kind of a visual pattern, right? And it's not a pattern in the like cut and sew sense where you like pin it to fabric and snip and then you are ready to stitch together, but it is your instructions in visual form.
It's literally your instructions for your sweater. So you would use this as a visual aid. And you could even write more notes and more, you could even write like each stitch out. I've done that before. If like you're doing a particularly confusing sweater, that's really helpful sometimes.
Awesome. Okay. I guess 1 or 2 more questions then. And again, anybody else who has questions, this is your chance. We have Elinor here with us. Definitely take advantage of this moment. But so you went to school for this.
Yes.
And I think that's really cool because a lot of knitters, you know, learned to knit at home, maybe from a relative, whatever, and going to school is a sort of a totally different education in it. And I'd be curious to hear well, so you learned hand knitting stitches, it sounds like, as a child, but
Yes.
what was different about what you learned when you got to school in terms of knitting, and would you recommend it to others who are excited about knitwear design or maybe not, or?
Yeah, I can talk about that. So I learned how to knit when I was very young, but I only ever really knit like scarves, hats, or pretty simple things. I had never made a sweater before until I went to college. And I actually was not very interested in knitwear design. I was like, okay, like, you knit a sweater, like, a scarf. I just didn't really have a concept of it until I took classes on it on the machine. I kind of It's almost like I learned to knit backwards because I learned how to do the sweater on the machine first, and I learned how to make this sort of visual schematic pattern in school, but in bigger, kind of life-size form for the machine knitting. Then I sort of began using that for my hand knitting and knitting sweaters by hand based on what I learned in school on the knitting machines. Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
I never, yeah.
Yeah, that's a really interesting sort of journey. Like, yeah. And would you recommend that to people who watch today and say, "Oh my goodness, I love this. I I want to take it farther," or not
Yeah,
necessarily?
I would absolutely recommend it. I don't think it's for everyone, but I think it's I you kind of learn what you could do with knitting, and like I didn't even know that some of the things I've learned how to do were possible using knitwear and the machinery. Um, so yeah, it's really eye opening. There's a lot to learn, so I feel like yeah, I would recommend it.
Okay, awesome. And for people for whom that's maybe just not realistic for, any number of reasons, are there other resources that you can point people to if they are excited about knitwear design, knitwear pattern design, and want to learn more?
Yes. So about specific resources, I'm not sure like off the top of my head, but I've learned so much just from watching YouTube videos online. Also just from like literally experimenting on my own hand knitting and seeing what works for me, making these patterns, making mistakes and then starting over again. Also just yeah, there's a lot of resources online, like classes. I mean, not like in-person classes, but tutorials, demonstrations. Um, Also, I've just found that knitting on the machine, like just the um, brother knitting machine, really changed my view of how I knit by hand. That's just how it worked for me. I hope that's helpful. Sorry.
Yeah, that's helpful and really interesting. Yeah, huh. It's interesting that kind of conversation and skill between hand knitting and machine knitting and how they kind of inspire different thoughts as you move between them.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, we have a question from Andy who asks, would you say knitting is pretty forgiving for new knitters, and are there any tips to make the learning process easier?
I would say it is forgiving and it isn't. Okay, because when you make a mistake, you can see it really clearly in your sweater. You have the wrong stitch, or I make mistakes with measurements all the time. Like my final garment that I made for my senior thesis, one side of the cardigan was 2 inches longer than the other side, and there was no, I had just somehow added in stitches on one side, like by accident. So that is, you know, forgiving. It's kind of unavoidable at times. But I also think, don't be afraid to start over. Don't be afraid to like totally unravel your sweater and start over if you need to. I know it can be like crazy frustrating, but it's also, it's worth it sometimes, and it's important to learn.
Awesome. And it's so refreshing to hear that other people also have sweaters that end up 2 inches longer on one side than the other. That is highly relatable. Okay. I'm going to jump in and recommend that people check out your work on your website, because we used to work together. And I remember when you were coming on board with our company where we worked together, you showed us during an interview some of your work from that senior thesis, which was inspired by classic horror films, and the sweaters and knitwear were so cool. So if people check that out, they should. Can sort of see where you can take things. Yeah, okay. Anything else that you would like to say or share before we start closing out today?
I think I'm all set. Everyone else is, but just thank you for having me.
Okay, yeah, thank you for being here. So let's see. Yeah, so if you do have further questions, feel free to email Elinor at ea.vizard@gmail.com. Feel free to Venmo her, of course, at ELINOR-VIZARD. Her Instagram is at Elinor Vizard. Yes. And Elinor, thank you so much for an awesome demo. Everybody, thank you for watching. For more info on future events, you can feel free to follow at Patternmaking in Public Places on Instagram. The recording of this video will be up soon on the patternmakinginpublicplaces.com website. And thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day.
All right. Thank you so much.